so I'm leaving it alone um, because there's no need to further fix what isn't currently broken. And we have not experienced any drops today. Now, yesterday I was talking about Minecraft and what is it. Um, I had believed that I did not get disconnected, but when I went back to edit and clip that out of the subsequent test, I discovered that there was a 30-second disconnect, but it was like 25 seconds before I noted being unable to chat, so it was very strange. Essentially, the only part that was missed is when I was explaining the 42-day creativity cycle between when I'm sitting here doing something and when I sit back down to look at and create a highlight or an archive or whatever it is I'm going to make sometime later, not the very next day typically, because that's not far enough out for me to get a true read of what it is. But I was able to retread all that information as I clarified it. So I highlighted that down into a 25-minute excerpt titled "What is Minecraft?" and added it to the Minecraft collection, which is quite nice now with all of the narration content that I pulled from streams over the last 2 months and ones where I sat down specifically to do Minecraft narration, which are mostly finished, but they still need their second pass. But we have not yet been connected or dropped any frames today. 2200 it is, and we will hopefully avoid that problem where Twitch was no longer interacting. We'll just leave both Wi-Fi and Ethernet on and see how it goes. Hopefully the two connections will just ensure parity to each other. I mean, is there any downside to that? I need to research this further. I noticed in XSplit that it's possible to specify a network connection. Rapacious Etherworm. Okay, guy. However, I can't use that function yet because I haven't started paying for XSplit, which I actually intend to do, so I may utilize all of its features and further justify the fact that I am sending out educational information and the whole vibe of what I do as an educator as a complete independent, as somebody who's absolutely unaligned to any sort of entity or brand, other than the strict truth of my personal desire to drop out from a system that demands that everybody participate in a for-profit model. I do not want that. I do not want to participate in the for-profit model. I want a world where currency flows regular and simply, and it's not a big deal and it's not a problem. In my book, the rule for all currencies is this: that it must flow freely, that it must just be available, just sitting around for people to go and pick it up if they want it. Why shouldn't we have a society like that? In my book, the definition of a functioning economy is a place in which any citizen can just go pick up some currency and is free to use it how they want. That would be a functioning economy. And there's a very simple reason for that, which is if currency is not freely available for somebody to just walk over to where it is, pick it up, and use it, then this means that the institution, as it were, the overall mechanism by which citizens interact with commerce, um, lacks liberty. It lacks freedom. This is basically how I define a functioning economic system, is one that actually contains a voluntary transaction model where somebody may choose of their own free will to exert an action, to create a transaction, to pick up currency and then use it to make an exchange that reflects what they find valuable. If they're unable to do so, then that means that what is found valuable is not being able to be evoked into manifestation. It's not being seen. It's not happening. And so that's not a functioning economy. Can you see how that sentence literally conveys the fact that that economy isn't functioning if what somebody wants, what they find valuable, isn't available for them to just walk over to some currency, pick it up, and use the currency to make the exchange that reflects what's valuable to that individual? That's what a functioning economy would mean. is that all individuals in the population express what is valuable to them by processing an exchange of currency to some other citizen who is able to make or provide what it is that the purchaser finds valuable. It is a vote placed by the purchaser, a purchase vote. When purchases are votes and they are regularly being carried out, what happens is commerce is held accountable to serving the baseline well-being, the baseline wishes of the individuals in the organism. And if they can't, if individuals are unable to just pick up currency and go use it to make a transaction toward what's valuable and necessary to their well-being, then commerce is not being held accountable to serving the well-being and the desires of individuals, to essentially serve what is valued by the individuals in the organism. And if that's the case, such as it is now in a non-decentralized income social organism, then what you have is a very, very large amount of dysfunction, where the work that is seen is only a very narrow slice of the work that the population needs, and so there's unmet work, essentially. You have a jobs crisis, essentially. That's literally what it amounts to, is a work crisis, for a very simple reason. That reason is there not being currency flowing freely. All that needs to happen in order to repair that problem is to start flowing the currency, to make currency available to the individuals in the organism, to just walk over and pick some up, like I'm doing now, to walk over and pick up this plant in the game, and then I go trade the plant to somebody. You see, currency reflects that action, the barter, the action of getting one item or service or action and exchanging it with somebody else's item or action. Currency just substitutes in to say the currency is going to reflect something, anything that you might find valuable, that you will want to purchase or that you would want to offer for purchase. But if there's no currency with which to make the exchanges, then it's not currency. The rule for all currency is that it needs to be freely available in order to flow into the hands of somebody who is providing the purchase. If that can't happen, then what you have to do, if there's some reason that you can't access currency, what individuals in that situation are forced to eventually do, it leads to this eventuality, is that they have to abandon the use of money and say, okay, well, since there is no money, no monetary way of exchanging, then what we're going to have to do is just exchange a good for another good, or a service for a good, or a good for a service. And we're just going to have to step around it, step past the convention of numeric monetary currency. But you see, that's going backwards. That's undoing the benefit of technology. It's much, much more difficult to exchange a good for another good, but not impossible, because you see, the mechanism of credit still works without numeric. But if you start talking about credit in terms of the abstract, in something that's not being described with a numeric value, then it's basically just yes or no. It's a binary IOU kind of a system. And that is actually still very blockchain-like. It's still very much reflective of the math of a working mesh network. I think maybe all monetary exchange is perhaps flowing in that direction inevitably, but it will be much easier if there becomes a decentralized income, a basic income floor. It's very, very easy to do. And to be honest, it's actually the best possible function for a government whatsoever that it could perform for a population would be to say to that population, okay, we are sick and tired of trying to rule you. We don't want to be responsible for trying to influence your behavior whatsoever. We're absolutely tired of it. We don't want to be in the trap of ruling you, of trying to govern you. Basically, the acceptance of the fact that you cannot govern by ruling. And the way of doing so as a government entity, as a governing body, is to say, okay, so we're no longer going to legislate anybody's behavior. We're no longer going to try and tell you what you should or shouldn't or can't do. We are going to respond to situations like what's happening now, the need to remove Trump for clear violence incitement. But other than very, very obvious situations such as that, where there is some harm to be reduced and some mischief to be responded to, we're going to leave that to individuals. This is where mutualistic law enforcement comes through. You know, eventually it leads to a fully mutualistic law enforcement type of a vibe. But that governing body just says, okay, we're absolutely done trying to enforce or legislate for any kind of particular behaviors from any of you. What we're going to do instead is just simply provide the currency. We're going to be the financial instrument for a liberty dividend that is going to be issued to any citizen who signs up for it. We're not going to ask you to prove anything other than just to verify the fact that you're a person that is here. Like, the whole idea of the census is completely backwards to be centralized in the way that it is. And the way you would fix it is to just say, okay, this is the census now. The census is you come here, you provide your information that identifies your personness in the society, and you check this box that says, hello, I'm here. I need funding for my life, for my family. My family's here. I'm here. We're here. Hello. And the government responds to that by saying, okay, we see that you are there. We see that you are a person. So here's your liberty dividend. Go spend it on evoking what is valuable to you in the society and make the transactions which will serve you. And the commerce in your community will serve you one transaction at a time in the ways that it can, in the ways that support your well-being. And we will be using that census metric that is constantly updating, because each month you check in with it to receive your currency. It will measure, well, are you still there or did you die? Like, if you don't check in and claim it, then what is the reason for that? It basically auto regulates itself in a way that it's the easiest possible means of governing, to just not rule, to make the census just be, come sign up for your liberty dividend and it will be issued to you. And there it goes forth, because from there it'll be transactions and purchases done with that currency, which bring the economics, the flow of economics, as it were, serving individual desires, what is valued by the individuals in the population, in other words. It's so much cheaper and easier to govern in that way than any of the complicated bullshit that's being done whilst governments are trying to govern by ruling. It's a dead end. It strictly cannot be done. So I think that this is inevitable. I believe we will reach to the point that the other ways of doing it will be abandoned because they reach a critical mass breaking point where it just can't be done anymore. And the situation of the pandemic is simply just revealing that. It's bringing forth the inevitability of a decentralization of income, because people need to be paid for their basic care that they do in families. And when somebody loses their job, that job or work no longer exists because of the currency failure, the currency failing to flow. And if it could be said that there are childcare jobs being lost as a result of this, then logically you can map that into, okay, so the childcare work still needs to be getting done. We have to agree that the care work, the work of care, needs to be done. It needs to happen, or else you don't have a society that's civilized and that is free. By recognizing the fact that childcare work is real, it exists, and it simply just remaps to the family, to the individuals who previously were reassigning it for the purposes of work in society. Those jobs go away and disappear, and so the childcare worker also disappears, but the work didn't disappear. The child is still there. Do you see what I'm saying? Each individual in the society maps some necessary work, some work that is guaranteed, um, that doesn't go away as long as the person lives, the family that receives and benefits from the care. So this is the simplest starting point when you say, okay, so how would you transition from governing, which doesn't do this, into governing that is strictly based on direct cash policy? That's how. You look at the child care work that is specifically unable to happen because work has disappeared, and there's basically what you're looking at there is the unemployment and the unemployment policies. You have to recognize that an unemployment policy fails in this situation. It doesn't really explain or address what's happened, because what's happened here is that the child care work is no longer being outsourced. It's no longer being assigned to a third party. Um, the child still needs care. The child still needs education. The humans in the family need that, no matter what. So, at the ground level of a functioning economy, where we started out on this thread, the ground level of a population which is going to have commerce, which is going to have any economics whatsoever, is that each human in the actual population, each citizen, maps to care, which constitutes that person's well-being, their health. And our main failure is seeing the institution of school fail so hard. It absolutely failed. And that failure is extremely magnified. It's super duper potentiated in the pandemic situation because it's a complete collapse of the institution. At the same time as childcare that isn't just the school institution falls as so much employment has disappeared. And the answer is just so simple. It's so incredibly simple to say, okay, so now what we need to do is modernize, I would say, or update our governing to incorporate this fact, to say this care needs to be done, this care costs funds, people need funds to do this, to eat food, to have basic shelter. And if you listen to some of the progressive independents out there, like Morning Invest is one I've been listening to lately, I'm sure he's got tons and tons of new viewership on that show because of the craziness going on here right now. The intelligent independents like Clayton on Morning Invest, just to name one example, understands that this is what we need to be a sane economy, to be an actual first world society. We need to understand that the people need to have health care. The people need to have income until such a time as the pandemic is completely gone, at which point we'll realize that we are going to cost ourselves money by stopping it, but we'll get there when we get there. At the moment, the situation is completely non-negotiable. We must see healthcare and direct cash monthly ongoing stimulus is what that's being called as it scaffolds to the final version, which is going to continue onward, which in my mind is universal basic education stimulus that ensures that education is available and is funded at the individual level, where individuals hold the commerce of their society accountable by the ongoing single purchase at a time method, so it never ever gets institutionalized into a broken governing body that absolutely can't make functioning decisions for individuals, because it just can't be done. Only the individuals can make those decisions that hold the commerce accountable to functioning how it needs to function. It can't be done by a government or by a rule or by a law. It's just making laws is the least effective way of persuading anybody. It simply can't know the information that will be known in an emergence sense by the commerce that is being driven by individual needs and individual valuation, when funding starts in the ground floor in the hands of people and is never ever permitted to concentrate into the hands of bureaus, governments, agencies, corporations, and any other kind of a ruler or gouger who is essentially just grifting the whole population. It can't work that way, and it will just escalate to a higher and higher and higher degree of failure, of the scam running its whole course to the point. So when you remove the scam out of this process, what you have left after taking the scam out is a system of income that goes directly to individuals who make purchases, who vote with their purchase to ensure the equitability, the viability of the commerce going forth from there. There's no other way to ensure it, and that's the fundamental principle of a blockchain style, a mesh network that self-verifies. It authenticates itself each step of the way. It can't be cheated because there's nothing to cheat, basically. This is so common sense. So the whole ideal of unrigging our common sense is what you have to understand about when I speak of economics that are mutualistic and that are 100% manifested of an education agenda, an agenda of people who will not be governed and will not be infringed by any party or entity or ruler presuming any type of authority over individuals that they don't have. That presumption is completely corrupt. And that's the problem. That's the reason our economics are failing, is because of that presumption of authority that is being made over individuals instead of just constructing a sane economy which yields to individuals being able to make their own decisions. To unrig our common sense, you have to see that perspective. You have to understand the ignorance culture, the idea that people are going along in our current economics and population with the completely wrong idea that letting people make their own decisions is somehow not practical or bad. We have to let people make their own decisions, and the way of doing that is to have an auto stimulus that provides them funds to go forth and evoke the economy that will take place, that will reflect individuals' values and what individuals need, what they desire, what they value, what they want, what they vote for with purchasing. It's very simple. That's democratic economics. It's just common sense. There's no other term I can use to describe what this actually is than the common sense of people being permitted to make their own decisions and to have a society which is zealous about this, a society that's like Bernie about this, that says and insists no one will infringe what individuals want, what is valued by an individual, because if we do that, we're dumb. We're ruining our own economy by infringing what individuals want, trying to scam them and trying to rig all these systems. It's literally against the independence that we claim to believe in. So all we need to do is economically return to that principle and say the only way to have a society that has liberty in this way is to start letting people make their own decisions and stop thinking that it's impractical that people would be able to make their own decisions and that they should have to answer to a ruler and a boss and a manager and a landlord and every other fucking checkpoint in these broken institutions. It's all pointless. It's all just destructive to our idea of liberty, of what having liberty would or should mean. It's all of that is deconstructed by false authority being presumed over people and limitations and infringements on people being able to make their own decisions. So what I don't get, what vexes me the heaviest with this thread is the fact that this should be the policy that anybody labeling themselves or thinking of themselves as within the slice of conservative. I don't think of myself as within any of these slices. I'm strictly an independent, a monk. But anybody who thinks of themselves as conservative should be in this thread here that says we absolutely don't want any governing bodies or any authorities whatsoever to be infringing upon either business, commerce, or individuals' will of what they want, of what their individual freedom. The libertarian conservatism is essentially what I'm describing here, which I'm not. I only just simply identify with this location on the math spectrum as an independent education, liberation, economics, identifying educator. They should love this. It should be the only thing anybody who says they are conservative wants to do, is to stop having any kind of government shit happening whatsoever over people. To have the government completely out of everybody's way, and to say, let's just get out of our own population's way, let's get out of our own way, and have a situation where people are making their own decisions, and where we're not trying to tell anybody what they should do. And we're understanding that that would be extremely foolish to try and enforce any kind of restrictions or infringements on either individuals or commerce entities, businesses. What we should want should be business which serves family needs and families as the sovereign unit in the society, whose purchases are solely dictating. That would be a free market. That would be the market's situation, with an actual free exchange of labor that is being dictated by purchases made by each family who is receiving their liberty dividend, their freedom dividend at the very baseline level, and that's where their income comes from. It doesn't come from some ruler who's deciding what they need to be obedient to in order to receive the income. Do you see how fucked up it is to have a society that's predicated upon an employer issuing you funds with which to buy your food or your housing, or some landlord who, they don't do anything. Landlords don't do anything when you pay rent to them. It's an absurd system that's launched up to the maximum possible level of absurd at this point, and we're going to see it fully crumble. It has to collapse into a liminal, destroyed rubble before we can do something else. It has to fall down and stop ruling over our lives before we can create a voluntary commerce system which will not be subject to such ridiculous scam tyranny. Okay, so I say bring it on. We're seeing the collapse begin, and it will collapse to the point such that an auto stimulus is the only possible response, and then we're going to see the voluntary commerce get built. And that's it.